And then the man leaves the room, but that same slave, verse 28. As he went out, came and fell upon his fellow slave who owed him 100 denarii. Now Jesus flips the comedy. 100 denarii. Even for inflationary purposes, $100. $100. You could probably swing it. Right? I mean, maybe you don't have it in your wallet. You probably got it in your digital wallet. Probably got it on your credit card. Probably got it on your check card. Heck, a few of you probably have it squeezed in the seats of your car. I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying, point is, it's not going to break you. You could probably come up with 100 and still make your mortgage. Maybe not, but you get my point. Yeah. Jesus goes from one silly extremity to the other. A guy that owes 10 million, and the same guy that owed 10 million goes right out onto the street and finds a man that owes him $100. And he literally holds his feet to the fire so that the man will give him the $100. But this guy doesn't even have $100. Jesus chooses to go to the lowest possible end of the spectrum, to a guy that can't scrape together the $100, to a guy that even that is as good as 10 million for. And how does the man who is recently forgiven, treating the man who needs forgiveness just as well? He throws him in prison along with all of his family, and he puts him in a perpetual debt that he can never pay back. And the word on the street gets back to the king. You know where the story's going. Of course, we've read the end. But I hope you're starting to sense that Jesus is trying to do something in this story. That Jesus is really trying to better answer Peter's question. What was Peter's question? Hey, how many times I got to forgive? And Jesus goes 70 times 7. And Peter probably kind of rolled his eyes like, what's that mean? He goes, okay, let me tell you a story. And so as the story unfolds, Peter's the audience, but so are you and I. This is why Jesus is such a good teacher. He's reaching forward to 2022, and he's grabbing a group of New Covenant people, and he's pulling them back here, and he goes, you remember when you came in under law and the bookkeeper God? He goes, remember that feeling of euphoria when you received of the forgiveness of sins and you received of the goodness of God? And right there's where things begin to shift, because what Jesus has done is introduced to us a man who heard about a debt being forgiven, but who did not receive it as an act of his Father's pity and big-heartedness. He received it based upon his own promise to pay it back. And what he did was he walked out of the encounter with a good God with a head full of payback. And when you walk out of an encounter with a good God with a head full of payback, what will you do to the people around you? You will only demand payback, because that's the world you've created for yourself. Even though the debt you were forgiven was astronomical, you could never pay God back, you still go about it as if you owe God something, and you turn your Christianity into a workhouse where you are constantly doing and doing and doing so that you can pay a God back who didn't forgive you because you promised. He forgave you because he pitied you. And we've forgotten why grace works. Grace doesn't work because you stumbled across Brother So-and-so's book. Grace works because sin was too big for you. Where iniquity doth abound, grace doth much more abound. Here's a bubble buster. You know why you came into grace? You finally admitted you were a failure. It's not because you got smart. It's because you got dumb, finally. I don't want to, listen, I'm right there in the middle. You want to know why we made it? Because it's the foolishness of the cross, Jesus said, by which many will be saved. He said, not many wise, not many noble are called. He goes, you're only going to figure this out when you stop being the smartest man in the room. Because the smartest man in the room is going to go get all the money he can from everybody else to try to pay God back, because he's got a bookkeeping idea of what his accounts look like, and he's just trying to make them better and better and better. But when you finally stop being the smartest man in the room and start being the biggest loser in the room, start admitting you're the biggest failure in the room, walk into the Father and bring all your garbage, in that moment, he goes, grace doth abound. And what happened is we got beneath that fountain and it washed us off. And here's the part that's not easy to handle. It washed us off, and we thought it was because we were just smarter than all those other people at that church. They were too stupid to catch what we caught. If they'd have been as smart as we were, they'd be following the Spirit like we are. Now listen, guys, I'm in grace circles, and I know what I'm talking about. This is the mentality that has been created. You want to know who this scripture is to? This scripture is not to your sinner friend. This scripture is to us. Let me take you back again. Just listen to this. Listen to Peter's question. Lord, if another member of the church sins against me, how often should I forgive? These are believers. This is us. Listen, this is Jesus reaching 2,000 years into the future and going, come here, church. Let me show you a story about yourself. You think you did this. You didn't do this. I just pity you. That's why I forgive you, because I feel sorry for you, because you can't do it on your own. I love it about you. I love it that you can't do it on your own. That means you'll hold my hand. That means you'll let me walk you across the desert. You'll let me carry you across that water. You'll let me. All the moments where you wouldn't let me is because you've been too smart, you've been too slick, you've been making too much, you've been doing too well. And you always thought that was favor. That's not favor. Favor's not when you've got it all figured out. It's when you got nothing figured out. It's in that moment when you bring me all of your failures and all of your problems, and then you just let me do it. And he goes, if you had just received that as a mark of pity rather than as a mark that you made me good promises, then you wouldn't have turned around and thought that everybody else was stupid and that everybody else was faithless and that everybody else was the problem, and you might have forgiven the people around you. And he goes, you want to know why it's so hard to forgive them? Because you don't know why you're forgiven. You think you're forgiven because you made good promises, but you're actually forgiven because I finally found someone who couldn't possibly pay me back. And I decided they needed some grace. James said, for God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace to the humble. Why did James write that? Because James knew that the key to discovering the grace of the pitiful Father, full of pity, the big-hearted God, who died to his bookkeeping ways so that you could have grace. Because forgiveness is a death. Because God died to what you owed him. Because you come to God and said, I need forgiven, and he goes, yeah, but you owe me a lot. Tell you what, I'm out of the bookkeeping business. I shut the thing down. We're going to take the shingle off the door. We're going to lock it up. No more bookkeeping. You get absolute freedom. Congratulations. And then we go right out into this world and we go to work for Jesus. And you go, yeah, but I don't hold anybody's feet to the fire for forgiveness. Just, man, what I've started to do is when I don't think I'm in the story, I've started to take a really big pause and push back from the table when I'm reading the Bible and go, okay, I'm starting to think I'm one character, but I got a feeling the reason you put me in this story in my heart, Lord, was because I haven't figured out which person I am in this story yet. And there's a reason you circled me back to this. So I need a little instruction. I need you to help me out just a little bit. I don't know what you do with your neighbor. I don't know how you handle those who have wronged you. But I know that Jesus' answer to Peter is the same answer he gives to us. Die to your right to be right. And that's where forgiveness starts. Die to your right to be avenged. And that's where forgiveness starts.